And now, held together by the shroud, Lempad's astral being can safely explore his world, looking back on his life and his art. A lantern is hung at the door of his house so that his wandering spirit can be guided back to his material body, lying at rest. His descendants and community entertain him with the music he loved. The children dance for his pleasure. Every night until cremation, the immediate family will keep constant vigil. They are assisted on some nights by traditional entertainment. The shadow puppet play is one of Bali's most important dramatic forms. Ancient legends are told by a single puppeteer. The audience can glimpse the world of their ancestors, a monochrome image of a richly coloured reality beyond. Puppet plays were a great influence on Lempad's drawing. Through a series of storybooks, he used the legends of Bali to express the philosophy of the island. In one of the stories, a young man's bride dies unexpectedly. He tears his hair and clutches her dead body to him. The great god Shiva points out that the body is but a cast-off shell. While he clings to an illusion, she in fact lives on. Admitting his folly, the husband decides to search for her in the realm of the ancestors. As Lempad tells it, the journey is a quest for self-knowledge. Lempad had been preparing his journey for some time.
Sebelum meninggal, beliau sudah memikirkan jalannya akan meninggal. Sebab sering beliau duduk di Puri mendengar cerita-cerita daripada Ida Cokorda.
My father had heard during many discussions in the palaces that it was best to die when the sun, in its cycle, was rising in the northeast. So he waited during his last year for the proper time to die.
Maka itu katanya Lempad itu agak lama sedikit dalam di pelangkan itu, artinya belum meninggal.
Many people asked him why he was taking so long to die. He replied, "I can't yet see the true path. I must wait until the sun rises in the northeast, then I can die."
Not only was the sun rising behind the great mountain to the northeast, but on the Balinese calendar it was Kajang Kliwong, an auspicious day for contacting the spirits, and one Lempad always chose to complete major projects. And so there can be little doubt that he chose his time and way of going. Lempad's arrival in this world was no less auspicious. He was born in Budulu, close to the most sacred river on the island. It flows through the very heartland of Balinese culture, and on its banks stand some of the most splendid remains of the ancient kingdoms. In his youth, he frequently bathed in the springs of a 10th century monastery hewn from solid rock. Lempad was to recall in his sculptures and architecture the weathered images of these shrines. The family rice fields faced onto one of the most extraordinary works of art on the island. Experts are unable to date or classify these carvings, though they believe them to be the creation of one man. But folklore claims this wall as the work of the giant Kebo Iwa, who carved them with his thumbnail. There is a personal vision in this particular sculpture, outside traditional form, which influenced the young Lempad. Lempad was born into a golden age of Balinese culture. They were a proud and refined people, and all life revolved around the hierarchy of the palaces. Centered at the very heart of the East Indies, this rich and still independent island was a tantalizing prize for the Dutch who otherwise dominated the region. But the Balinese were renowned warriors, and with the emergence of folk heroes such as the brilliant strategist Jelantic, the kingdoms of southern Bali held the Dutch at bay for more than half a century. Despite the splendor, it was an age of decadence. When not resisting the Dutch offensives, the Balinese princes were constantly waging petty wars among themselves. The battles were not restricted to man. Gods and supernatural beings were believed also to throw themselves wholeheartedly into the fray. Barong, the benevolent guardian of the community, was one such being. The young Lempad was commissioned to carve 2 Barong masks for Bedulu. Ratu Barong defends the temple and the community from evil. While Lempad was working on this Barong, his father was beginning to experience difficulties with the Prince of Bedulu.
Itu dikira Gusti saya punya kakek Gustabe pekulon Gusti ayah daripada Gusti Nyaman Lempad.
My grandfather was getting too successful for some people's liking.
Akan menduduki kedudukan daripada Benese yang telah ada karena beliau itu seseorang yang sudah
His star was on the ascendant, and this was causing jealousy.
Mananya. Nah daripada itu terus dibuat fitnah, dibilang kepada Raja Batu.
So he asked the prince for permission to move away. But a good friend heard that the prince was planning to exile him and his whole family to a remote island.
That night, Lempad and his father slipped out of Bedulu and eventually came to Ubud, which at that time was a minor princedom, which could not even boast a royal palace. The ambitious Prince of Ubud was quick to take advantage of young Lempad's talents. A palace to rival the great kingdoms was built with his help. As the prestige of the region spread, temples and palaces sprouted above the mud walls. Lempad was kept constantly busy, and the Ubud of today is largely of his making. His artistic style in the formative years was firmly set within the traditional mold of Balinese design. But the quirkish humor that was to dominate his later work was already in evidence. Over the years, Lempad's new home in Ubud took on the air of a small museum, filled with the art he created for his own pleasure. A young girl came to join him here and became his second wife. His first had failed to bear children, so following Balinese custom, he married her younger sister. The three of them lived together in harmony, bringing up their 5 children until the first wife's death in the 1940s. Gusti Nyang, his second wife, is a spry 95.